money. Every biography of a great fortune has the same paragraph buried in it. It's usually on page 2 or 3. It's always short, and it's always rushed past. It reads something like this: the family's rise began in an industry that, by today's stance, would be considered ruthless, even indefensible. Then the book moves on fast. Nobody lingers there, which is strange because that paragraph isn't a footnote. It's the whole story. Old money didn't become respectable because the money got cleaner. It became respectable because eventually people stopped asking where it came from. That's the actual mechanism. Not a bank, not a shell company, not one transaction anyone could point a finger at. Something slower, something that barely looks like anything is happening while it's happening. By the end of this video, you won't just know how it works. You'll start seeing it everywhere. Act 1, the mess. Start almost anywhere. Pick a family name that still makes a room go a little quiet with respect. Then dig into how the money actually started. You'll find the same shape again and again. A fortune built fast inside an industry that at the time ran on rules we'd now call brutal. Standard Oil didn't come to dominate the American economy by being polite to competitors. It dominated by making sure competitors quietly stopped existing, a strategy so aggressive that in 1911 the US Supreme Court ordered the entire company broken apart, ruling it had crossed the line from competing into monopolizing. That same year, the court did almost the exact same thing to the American Tobacco Company, the empire behind the Duke family fortune. Two of the most dominant companies in the country dismantled within months of each other for the same reason. Carnegie Steel produced more of the material that built modern America than almost anyone in history. It also produced Homestead, Pennsylvania, 1892, where a labor dispute turned into an armed standoff between striking workers and private security. People on both sides died. Cornelius Vanderbilt built his shipping and railroad empire on a tactic still studied in business schools today: undercut every rival's prices until they went bankrupt, buy up what was left, and only then raise the fares back once there was nobody left to compete. None of this is secret. It's in textbook. It's public record decided in open court. So here's the real question. Not did this happen, something stranger. If the record is sitting right there in plain sight, why does the name Rockefeller now sound like a university library instead of a monopoly? Why does the name Duke sound like a university instead of an antitrust case? And this isn't a uniquely American story. Wherever great fortunes take root, banking dynasties, shipping empires, and trading houses that span continents, you'll find some version of the same uncomfortable early chapter filed away in a footnote nobody reads out loud. That's not an accident, that's a process. And it has stages. Act 2, the illusion. Here's what almost nobody tells you. None of the harshest chapters were ever actually hidden. They're not classified. They're not buried in some vault. Anyone can read the court transcripts today for free. And yet somehow that's not the version most people carry around in their heads. In 1924, Trinity College in North Carolina took a $40 million gift and quietly became Duke University. The money came directly from the same tobacco fortune the courts had ruled a monopoly barely a decade before. Today, almost nobody hears the name Duke and thinks cigarette trust. They think university, basketball, research hospital. That's not a coincidence. And it's not concealment either. Nothing here is technically hidden. It's something closer to redirection. Hand the public a newer, warmer story to hold on to, and the old one doesn't get erased. It just stops being the first thing anyone thinks of. Walk into almost any major museum, concert hall, or research hospital in the country, and you'll find the same mechanism at work, one donor wall at a time. It's not one family's trick. It's closer to standard operating procedure for wealth that wants to outlive its own headline. This is where most people get the bigger story wrong. They assume the ugly version is always the true one, and the respectable version is always a cover-up, but it's rarely that simple. Almost every old fort eventually grows its own folklores about the money's true origin, repeated so many times they start to feel documented fact, whether or not anyone can actually find the paper trail behind them. Sometimes the ugly version is exactly what happened. Sometimes it's a legend that quietly outlived the truth. The unsettling part is how hard it can be to tell the difference, even for historians standing in the archive with the real documents in there. Act 3, the machine. There's an old saying about family fortunes: shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. One generation builds, the next spends it, the third is broke again. It's usually told as a warning, but there's a second pattern hiding inside that one, and it isn't really about the money, it's about distance. Generation 1 builds the fortune and absorbs the reputational cost of building it fast. Generation 2 inherits both the money and the discomfort attached to the name. Generation 3 inherits something else entirely. They were never in the room, they never made the calls that hurt people. To the public, they're not industrialists, they're patrons, trustees, the person cutting the ribbon at the new children's wing. By the time a third generation is standing at a podium, thanking everyone for coming, almost nobody in the room has any interest in asking where the money started. Time doesn't erase the record, and it just changes who's standing in front of the camera. But that distance doesn't build itself. Someone constructs it deliberately, and this is where the real machinery shows up. Family trusts move wealth to the next generation while minimizing what the tax code takes. Private foundations convert a taxable fortune into tax-advantaged giving while keeping the family name attached to every single dollar that goes out the door. Family offices, the private firms that exist purely to manage one family's money across generations, quietly professionalize the entire operation. Some families go further still, setting up dynasty trusts, designed to hold assets not just for one generation, but for century structures built quite literally to outlast the memory of how the money was made in the first place. And it's not only financial engineering. The same families that built these structures also built networks, elite school, private club, marriages between old names, quietly manufacturing a kind of social insulation that no amount of new money can simply buy its way into. None of this is illegal. That's the part people miss. It's the opposite. It's some of the most heavily lawyered, thoroughly legal financial architecture that exists, often built by the direct descendants of industries that in their founding decades operated by none of those rules at all. But notice what these tools actually do underneath the tax benefits. A foundation doesn't just move money, it moves attention. Act 4, the rewrite. Every grant, every gala, every plaque bolted to a wall is a small and repeated announcement. This family gives, this family builds, this family cares. Say that enough times, in enough marble lobbies, and it stops sounding like a strategy. It starts sounding like an identity. That's the real function of philanthropy inside an old money story, not just generosity. Though it's often genuine, it's also the single most effective reputation tool that's ever been legally devised. And once that reputation is secure, something stranger happens. It stops being a byproduct of the fortune. It becomes more valuable than the fortune itself. A name that opens doors nobody can simply buy their way through. A name a university competes to put on a new building. That kind of social capital can't be purchased in a single transaction. It has to be built the way a reef is built, slowly, by accumulation, until you can no longer see the individual pieces, just the shape they made together. You can't inherit that kind of trust the way you inherit a stock portfolio. It has to be earned publicly, again and again, in full view of the people whose opinion it's meant to change. And once that shape exists, it starts protecting itself. Question the origin of an old fortune today, and you're not just questioning a business decision from 1890, you're questioning a library a stranger's kid is studying now, a hospital wing where somebody's grandmother recovered. The reputation doesn't just sit there quietly, absorbing scrutiny. It actively makes the original question harder to ask. And here's the part almost nobody notices while it's happening. Society doesn't admire old money because it forgot how the fortune started. Society admires old money because the people holding it now didn't start. There's a very specific, very human forgiveness extended to people for things they didn't personally do, even while they're the direct beneficiaries. We judge act, not inheritance. Old money didn't invent instinct. It just learned, with remarkable precision, how to wait. Act 5, the final reveal. Here's where the story gets more complicated and more current. The old version of this playbook, build the fortune fast, let reputation launder slowly, let the grandchildren collect the goodwill, has gotten harder to run quietly. In April 2016, a leak of offshore financial records known as the Panama Papers dragged decades of hidden financial structuring into public view almost overnight. In October 2021, the Pandora Papers did it again, on an even larger scale. Investigative journalists, tax authorities, and researchers now have tools, databases, and cross-border cooperation that simply didn't exist 100 years ago, or even 30. The distance that used to protect a third generation, the sheer difficulty of tracing money back 100 years isn't nearly as reliable as it used to be. That doesn't mean this pattern has stopped happening. It means it's had to get more careful, more legal, more patient than it's ever needed to be before. The families still running this playbook well today are the ones you've genuinely never heard a bad word about. That's not luck. By this game's own definition, that's success. The ending. So did old money ever actually clean dirty money? Not the way the phrase makes it sound. There was no vault, no single wire transfer, no moment where dirty quietly became clean. What actually happened was slower and, in its own way, more remarkable. The money didn't change. The story around the money changed. A ruthless industrialist became a philanthropist. A monopolist became a university's most beloved donor. A controversial fortune became a family name so respected that questioning it now feels almost impolite. That's the secret sitting underneath the title of this video. Not a conspiracy, not one hidden transaction, just generations of a very human instinct there to be remembered, kindly pointed at a problem money alone could never solve. Old money was never really in the business of laundering money. It was in the business of laundering memory. And unlike money, memory, once it's clean, never runs out.